Smoke hung like a living thing over the shattered horizon, a metallic haze twisting in the blue glare of twin suns. Kareth dragged herself from the wreckage of her citadel, her wings dragging scars across the scorched stone. Once they shimmered with molten gold. Now they were fractured mirrors of ash and soot. The war had ended days ago, or years perhaps. Time lost meaning when the sky stopped roaring. Only silence remained, thick and heavy, as if the world itself mourned. She stumbled through the remains of what had been her throne hall. Obsidian columns lay in ruin, the sigils of her ancestors carved into rubble. Her claws scraped over cracked metal plates that once formed her armor, forged in the furnaces of her kin. The traitor's voice still echoed faintly in her mind, promises of unity, of peace between dragonkind and man, before the human fleets fell from orbit like flaming knives. Her vision blurred. Embedded sensors in her neck flickered, ancient augmentations pulsing weakly. She tore them free, unwilling to feel the hum of a world that had betrayed her. The air tasted of rust and ozone. When night came, the stars above were not the same. Artificial constellations shimmered, satellites drifting among them, watchers of a dead empire. She found a hollow beneath a collapsed arch and coiled her body, trying to sleep, but her mind refused. Every heartbeat reminded her she was the last flame in a world of smoke. Then through the static of the night, she heard a voice. Not a machine, not the whisper of drones, but something soft and human. A faint call carried by the wind, followed by the flicker of a small plasma lantern. She rose silently, scales whispering like shifting sand. A figure moved below, a man unarmed, his silhouette trembling against the glow. He was searching through debris, speaking to himself in low tones. There has to be someone left. Kara's pupils narrowed to slits. Her breath ignited faint sparks. No one had spoken words like that in an age. The man turned, sensing her presence, and instead of fleeing, he lifted his hands. The lantern's light reflected in his eyes. Steady, frightened, but alive. You look lost, he said. For the first time since the fall, Kareth did not know whether to burn or to answer. He did not run when she descended from the broken arch. The dust rose around her like the breath of a storm, her wings half spread, molten veins glowing beneath fractured scales. The human stood his ground, clutching the plasma lantern against the wind. His coat, once white, was torn and marked with fading insignias, medical, military, and something older. The scent of ozone surrounded him, mingled with the faint hum of energy cells buried in his chest plate. Are you alive? He asked, his voice small against the endless ruin. Kareth circled him, her talons scraping sparks from the metal beneath their feet. His heartbeat thundered in her ears, fragile and fast. Yet there was no weapon, no fear-tinted movement, only exhaustion. She leaned close enough for her breath to scorch the ground beside his boots, and still he did not flee. He introduced himself as Elias, a field medic from the Terran Relief Corps. His people, he said, had sent ships after the war to find survivors, not conquerors. She almost laughed at the absurdity. Humans had burned her skies, shattered her people, and now one of them came with a lantern and mercy. Still, something in his tone disarmed her. His voice trembled, but his words carried weight. He spoke of rebuilding, of searching through wreckage for anyone still breathing. Kareth listened in silence, tail coiled tightly behind her. Her instincts whispered of deceit, yet his scent, salt, copper, and something warm, carried no malice. When the night deepened, he lit a small thermal beacon. Its steady pulse painted their faces in blue light. You shouldn't stay exposed, he murmured. The drones sweep this sector every cycle. He gestured toward a collapsed shelter and stepped inside without waiting for her approval. She watched him for a long time, unsure why she hadn't incinerated him. The wind howled, and she felt the ancient ache of loneliness claw at her chest. Then with a low rumble, she followed. Inside, he was repairing a broken comm link, its circuits sparking under his touch. When the signal finally hummed to life, a flicker of static filled the air. Then a word barely audible. Kareth! He had found her name. Her claws froze mid-motion. She turned toward him slowly. How do you know that name? She whispered. Elias met her gaze and smiled faintly. Because the stars still remember you. The sound of the repaired comm link lingered like a ghost between them, its static heartbeat filling the silence. Kareth stared at Elias, trying to decipher the calm in his face. Humans should have feared her name. It was etched in war records, cursed in every Terran command archive. Yet this one spoke it like a vow. He explained that fragments of the old network still floated in orbit, carrying echoes of forgotten transmissions. Her name had appeared there, attached to ancient signals marked non-hostile, flagged for retrieval, not extermination. Elias said he'd followed that trace. When she laughed, it came out as a low, bitter growl. "Humans chasing ghosts now?" she asked. He didn't deny it. "Sometimes ghosts lead us to the living," he replied. Over the next cycles, she allowed him to remain. He scavenged old Terran medkits, recalibrated broken drones into helpers that floated silently around their camp. Kareth watched him rebuild fragments of civilization with hands that trembled but never faltered. He learned the rhythm of her silence, when to speak and when to simply exist beside her. At night, he patched her torn wing membranes with carbon thread film, whispering readings from the scanner: temperature, regeneration rate, bioelectric flow. His voice was steady, clinical, yet she sensed reverence in it, as though he were tending to something sacred. She did not thank him. Dragons did not thank humans. But one night when he slept by the fire, she adjusted the thermal shield to protect him from the cold. Days turned into rotations. The air tasted less of ash. She found herself listening for his heartbeat, a soft reminder that not all warmth came from flame. But the illusion of peace was fragile. From beyond the dunes came the low hum of engines. Search drones, their sensor arrays slicing through the dusk. Ilias froze. "Coalition units," he whispered. "They'll scan for non-human signatures." Kareth rose, her eyes reflecting the distant light. "Then they'll find death," she said. But Elias stepped forward, raising his hand toward her. "No, let me handle it." She wanted to laugh again, but the fear in his scent wasn't for himself. It was for her. For the first time, a human stood between her and danger, not as prey, but as protector. The first explosion shattered the stillness like a scream through metal. Drones descended from the smog-choked sky, their sleek forms glinting with human insignias. Silver wings marked with crimson light. Kareth's instincts ignited. Plasma gathered in her throat, painting the ruined walls in violent orange. Elias grabbed her wrist, his skin scorching under her touch. "They'll track energy signatures." "Don't," he hissed. But the moment his voice broke, a targeting beam swept across them. She moved faster than memory. A torrent of blue fire erupted from her chest, melting the first drone mid-descent. The second retaliated with kinetic rounds, shattering debris into molten shards. Elias was thrown backward, his body slamming against the wreckage of an old reactor casing. Sparks cascaded like dying stars. Kareth roared, a sound that shook the ground itself. Her wings unfolded fully for the first time since the fall, arcs of energy weaving between her scales as her bioimplants reignited. The air hummed with radiation. She leapt into the swarm, claws tearing through steel. The scent of burning circuitry filled her lungs. Yet even as she destroyed them, she felt something tear deeper. Fear not for herself, but for the fragile human bleeding below. When the final drone fell in pieces, silence returned, broken only by Elias's shallow breath. She knelt beside him, her claws trembling as she brushed dust from his face. His side was soaked crimson. The shrapnel pulsed faintly with residual charge. The metal was fused with smart nanite threads meant to prevent healing. Human weapons. Human cruelty. She inhaled deeply, then pressed her palm over the wound. The fire that left her body was no longer meant to destroy. It seared, cauterized, sealed. Ilias gasped, his eyes wide, but the bleeding stopped. "That will scar," he murmured, voice thin. "Scars are proof you lived," she said, voice softer than she intended. He laughed weakly, and the sound struck her like a memory she didn't know she'd missed. As night fell, she carried him into the buried transport ship nearby. Its hull still thrummed faintly with forgotten power. Inside, the old lights flickered to life, bathing them in ghostly blue. She placed him on a padded bench once meant for soldiers and sat beside him. Outside, the storm passed. Inside, she felt something far more dangerous stirring, a warmth that had nothing to do with flame. The hum of the old transport ship became their heartbeat. Kareth had sealed the entrances with melted alloy, and the storm outside howled against it like a living creature. Elias drifted in and out of consciousness, the glow of his biomed implant flickering weakly through his chest plate. She remained at his side, her tail curled close, the warmth of her core spreading through the cold interior. Every now and then, he muttered her name, not in fear, but in trust, and each time, something inside her ached. When he woke, his first words were a whisper. "You stayed." "I owed you nothing," she said, but her voice cracked at the edges. He smiled faintly, seeing through her. He tried to sit up, wincing, and pointed at the ship's console. "I can patch into the Coalition's scanners from here. They'll be looking for us." She let him work, watching his hands move over the flickering holograms, fingers trembling, but sure. Hours passed. Through the broken viewport, the stars were pale scars across the sky. Then the console chimed. Motion signals. Coalition patrols. Kareth tensed, but Elias raised a hand. "Let me speak to them. If they see you, they'll open fire." He staggered toward the open hatchway, the cold wind slicing in. The soldiers arrived in exosuits, faceless in silver, weapons humming. "Step aside, medic," their commander barked. "The creature is property of the tribunal." "Stand down," Elias didn't move. "She's not property," he said quietly. "She's under my care." The commander's visor gleamed. "You'd defend a war criminal?" Kareth heard the charge coil build, smelled ozone seconds before it fired. She lunged. Energy seared past her wing and struck the wall behind. Flames blossomed, consuming the corridor. She spread her wings fully, their membrane alive with golden circuitry and molten light. The soldiers stumbled back, blinded. She didn't kill them, only melted their weapons into useless slag. When the smoke cleared, Elias stood at her side, coughing but alive. She reached down, pulled him into her grasp, and in one mighty surge of heat and light, burst through the ceiling. The ship's wreckage fell away beneath them. The night opened above like a forgotten promise. Air streamed across her scales. Her wings caught the wind and memory all at once. Ilias clung to her back, whispering something against the storm that made her chest tighten. "You're home now," he said. They landed where the air was thin and the mountains reached beyond the clouds. The northern highlands shimmered faintly with aurorae, colors bending across the ice like liquid fire. It was quiet here. No machines, no patrols, only wind and the faint pulse of distant reactors buried beneath snow. Kareth built a small shelter from ship debris, her wings now whole, their edges catching the faint light. Elias's wound had healed into a pale scar, marked by her flame. He often touched it absent-mindedly, as though it reminded him he was still real. Weeks passed, and they found others. Survivors, human and not. Scattered colonists, half-starved engineers, a few hybrid children whose eyes glowed faintly in the dark. The refugees feared her at first. Some hid behind broken walls, others reached for weapons that no longer worked. But Elias stepped forward each time, introducing her not as monster or queen, but as the one who had saved his life. Gradually, the fear melted. Kareth worked among them, her fire no longer a weapon but a tool. She reignited frozen reactors, thawed water conduits, and forged metal beams for their shelters. When a reactor core nearly collapsed, she dove into the molten chamber and redirected the energy through her own body. The surge burned through her scales, but the light it released illuminated the valley for miles. When she emerged, the children cheered. For the first time, she smiled. At night, Elias read from old human texts, poems, fragments of forgotten songs. His voice echoed softly between the peaks. She listened, head resting near the fire, her heartbeat matching the rhythm of his words. Once she asked him what humans meant when they said home. He paused for a long time, then looked at her with eyes full of stars. "It's not a place," he said. "It's someone who makes you stay." The dawn after, she stood upon the cliff's edge, the rebuilt colony below glimmering with new life. The sky burned gold as the first transport ships of the reconstruction fleet arrived. Not for conquest, but alliance. Kareth spread her wings, feeling the warmth of both suns on her back. When Elias stepped beside her, she turned toward him and saw no fear, no pity, only belonging. For the first time since the fall, she whispered the words she once thought she'd never speak again. "I'm home."